All right, good afternoon. I'm going to call to order this regular meeting of the Public Safety, Civil Rights, and Emergency Management Committee. Today is March the 4th, 2015. I am Councilmember Blong Yang, chair of this committee. With me today are council members Reich, Gordon, and Warsame, and the other two council members may join us as we go along. Today we have 4 items on the agenda. 2 of them are consent items and 2 of them are discussion items. The first 2 consent items, one is to accept a proposal from Hennepin County Technical College for police training services for cadet recruits training to be conducted in the spring of 2015 for up to 32 pre-selected police cadet recruit candidates, and authorizing a contract for services for an estimated maximum amount of $94,000, and this would be referred to Ways and Means. The second item is to authorize a contract with the Minnesota Department of Commerce to reimburse the MPD for overtime costs in an amount up to $2,500 for participation on a fraud task force, and approving budget appropriation. This would be referred also to Ways and Means. The third item is Contract Compliance Division reporting, receiving, and filing the 2014 fourth quarter and annual, and also the fourth quarter report and the annual summary report. The fourth item is with regards to the Office of Police Conduct Review, receiving and filing their 2014 year-end report. With that, I will move that we approve the first 2 items, item number 1 and 2. Is there any discussion on either of those items? Anyone want to pull them off for discussion? All right, well, before we take a vote on that, if we can, do we need to tell somebody up there to calm it down? For the folks out there in the audience, and also just folks watching around the world, I guess, if they do, we have kind of a gymnasium upstairs, and so sometimes, you know, when we're having our meetings, there might be folks playing basketball upstairs. So we're going to make a phone call and hopefully get that quieted down a little bit. I think we're okay to move on, right? All right, so item number 1 and 2 on the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? The motion carries. And I wanted to introduce Council Members Palmisano and Council President Johnson, who both just joined us. And you were walking in while you were voting, right? Nice. Okay. All right. Yes. The third item is to be presented with the fourth quarter and the annual summary report for contract compliance. And is that you, Ms. Francois? Okay. Okay. All right.
Good afternoon, Chairman Yang, Council President, and committee members. My name is Velma Corbel. I'm the director in the Minneapolis Department of Civil Rights. And I don't have very much to say today except to introduce the agenda items that are following. The Contract Compliance Division is reporting on its quarterly report and the annual summary report. And then the next item that the chair has yet to introduce is the Office of Police Conduct Review's 2014 report. And insofar as what I would like to say, there are several people in chambers this afternoon who are responsible for the really great results you'll hear from both of these teams this afternoon. Karen Francois, who's the division director in the Contract Compliance Division, is here with 2 of the senior professionals in her team, Leslie Woey and Kalu Wilson, and they are doing a fabulous job in contract compliance with the rest of their team members. And I would also introduce Division Director Michael Brown and Commander Christopher Granger, the joint supervisors in the Office of Police Conduct Review, who will be providing the information on the Office of Police Conduct Review annual report. And they're here today with one of their senior professionals as well, Ryan Patrick, who is here to my right. And I apologize if I'm getting ahead of myself, Chairman Yang, but I have to run here in a little bit. It feels like I've been running already. I ran upstairs, and so I'm still out of breath. But I apologize. I'm going to have to leave the meeting a little early because I made a commitment to some colleagues in St. Paul, and I need to be over there this afternoon. But the thing that I would just call your attention to, in particular with the contract compliance report, is that you will hear results of work, better results than we've seen from the contract compliance division in a long time. And that work does not happen automatically. It is a result of some very significant and serious compliance monitoring on the part of the staff there, but it's also the result of a lot of really good relationships made with our partners in the community, whether they be nonprofits or contractors in doing the good work that you'll hear the results of here in a little bit. But there are also several internal partners that this group has been working with that have been really wonderful over the past year in our finance department, in community planning and economic development, and in the larger departments where the projects occur, like CPED, like Public Works, like the fire department. So I'm just very pleased with the results. You will hear, and Council President Johnson will be very happy to hear this, we've got better women workforce numbers that we're reporting about today than we've had in the 5 years that I've been here. And that, again, goes with a lot of hard work and oversight from the people who are in the room. But I also wanted to take just a minute to comment on our work going forward. I know, without stealing thunder from Councilmember Gordon, that there's probably going to be discussion a little bit later about requesting that staff engage in some additional best practices work with our agency partners around the region. And I just want people to know that this is not a new thing for us. This is something that we do, that we're always doing, because we don't do well without the partnerships and the relationships without those relationships with our community partners. So when you talk about work that the Met Council is doing, or work that the Minnesota Department of Human Rights is doing, or work that MnDOT is doing, all of these organizations and individuals share with us, and we also share with them. So to speculate in some way that the work happening in the Civil Rights Department's Contract Compliance Division is not as stellar and comprehensive as the work happening in these other divisions, I think is probably not a complete picture of what is happening in the department, because this department and this division is recognized as having subject matter experts in it with regards to this work, as well as recognition for the subject matter experts in our partner agencies and organizations that do this type of work. So I wanted to say that before introducing Ms. Francois, and I want her to get the kudos and credits for the great work that her team has done over the last 12 months. So.
Thank you, Director Corbel. Thank you, Chair Yang, council members, President Johnson. My name, for the record, is Karen Francois, and I am the Director of the Contract Compliance Division for the city's Civil Rights Department. And I'm pleased, very pleased, to be here with two of my staff, as Director Corbel introduced earlier, Kalu Pei and Leslie Woyi, who are senior contract compliance officers. And I'm pleased to be here with them to present a summary of the great work that we've been doing in the Contract Compliance Division over the past year. I'm going to first start with our summary for the fourth quarter. As you all know, the Contract Compliance Division monitors City of Minneapolis construction projects, procurement, and contracting to ensure that minorities and women-owned businesses and workforce are included and have an opportunity to be included in public contracting. I'd also like to just say a little bit more about what the director said just a minute ago. We have worked very hard here within the city with our internal partners and our external partners and stakeholders outside of the city. We've already begun a lot of process improvements. We've implemented some of those processes, and I think you're going to be able to see that in some of the results that I'll be sharing with you here today. In the fourth quarter, of the 8 construction projects totaling over $24 million that closed during the fourth quarter, $2,282,000 of those dollars, or 9.48%, went to minority businesses. 1.7 or almost $1.8 million, 7.37%, went to women-owned businesses. Our aspirational goal for business inclusion for minorities and women is a total of 25%, 12% for minorities and 13% for women. In the fourth quarter, we reached approximately 17 or 18% of that total, with $4 million total going into the minority and women business enterprise community. In the fourth quarter for workforce inclusion, we closed projects with a total of approximately 127,000 total project hours. 17.03% of those were performed by minority workers, and 8.42% were performed by female workers. As you all know, the goals that were set in 2012 by the Commissioner of the State Department of Human Rights were 32 and 6. And we are well on our way to achieving that 32 and 6 goal as we continue throughout the next few years. That's a summary of our 2014 results. Now I'm going to move on to a summary of our results for the year for 2014. In 2014, 59 construction projects closed, totaling about $232 million. $17 million, or 7.44%, went to minority business enterprises. $27 million went to women business enterprises, for a total of the year, out of $232 million, $44,818 million went to minority and women-owned businesses. Out of the 25% goal, that's 19.32%. So again, really good numbers for the entirety of 2014. For minority and female workforce inclusion, for the year in 2014, out of closed projects, there were approximately 1.3 million total project hours. 18.40% were performed by minority workers. 5.7% were performed by female workers. Out of 32 and 6, we were able to achieve for 2014, 18.40 and 5.70. Again, we're well on our way to achieving 32 and 6 in a time frame that is consistent with the time frame that was established by the Commissioner of Human Rights in 2012. Now I'd like to ask if you have any questions.
Ms. Francois, when you talk about this time frame, what's this time frame?
Well, there have been several occasions on which the commissioner actually talked about when he set the goal, looking at a 10-year time frame in which we would likely see the achievement of 32 and 6. I had a conversation with him last week, Mr. Chair, and what he said to me is more important than the timeline. It's for us to be able to look back and see where we are today compared to where we were before. And as Director Corbel stated earlier, these numbers are better than we've seen in the 5 years that she's been in the department. So I do believe that we are well on our way to achieving the workforce inclusion goals.
Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you very much. And that did make me think of something that I thought it might be useful for us to get with these annual reports, because I was looking at the 18.4 and I thought, well, that seems like it's a lot higher than it was in previous years, and that maybe it's been steadily climbing a little bit. But I didn't have, I didn't go back to look at all the reports and see that. But it might be interesting in the future to then look back and we can see how we're trending over time, if we are indeed making progress or not, and how much progress. Because and maybe you know where we were last year, what the overall percentage was for workforce inclusion. So if you don't, I totally understand. But if you do, where were we?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, I don't have those numbers. And one of the things that we've been doing, one of the processes that we have improved over this past year is our reporting capabilities and looking more specifically at projects that have closed. And at the end of last year, we did not do an annual summary. It hasn't been something that the division has been used to doing. And so we don't have a final number for the end of last year. But I can tell you that 18.4 is better than we've been achieving over the quarters over the past several years.
Well, I appreciate that. I know that in 2013, for example, when I looked at the fourth quarter, the business inclusion was around 7%, and I haven't gotten to the workforce inclusion yet. But so I think that's important to acknowledge, because looking at a lot of these graphs, we see that the blue part is a lot lower than our goal, and so we still look like we have a long way to go. And I think that we do, especially in some cases or in some contracts or some projects. There's a lot further to go than others, and I think that it's crucial and it's important that we keep pushing on that, and that's how we're going to get there. One of the things that I wanted to do and plan to do is move staff direction to just ask for you, I guess, to continue doing the work that you're already doing, pursuing best practices, and maybe come back. I know there's a symposium that's going to be happening in the spring where you're going to get regional partners together and kind of analyze this. But then to kind of do that research and come back in July and give us a report on best practices. Also, what struck me in this report is you look at this and there appear to be some real rock stars out there. Emmanuel Housing, for example, was over 20% in terms of their workforce inclusion. The Meyer Contracting was over 20%. The Schaefer Contracting Company was over 25% for minority and over 70% for female workforce inclusion. So they must have a lot of women of color working. I'm not sure exactly how they did that, and that is for construction of concrete sidewalks. So not a typically female, traditionally female, I'm not sure what the right word is, work. So, and then there's another one, Northern Air, and then even Ryan Companies did really well. I think there was another one, Weiss, that did really well. So what struck me is, well, these companies and these contractors must have some tools and have some protocols, have some practices that they're using where they know how to tap into the right pipelines to be able to accomplish these. And maybe if we could raise that up and articulate what they are, share those, and share them with some of the others who aren't performing quite so well in this capacity, it would be really valuable. So not only looking at what our regional partners doing, but what are some of the high-performing contractors doing to have their success so that we can kind of raise those best practices up.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, I'd also like to point out the fact that we have one of our community partners in the room, Hire Minnesota. Their new campaign manager is in the room with us. And we actually sat down and met with Nick and some of his team this past week, and they are doing some really good work working with individual contractors on their inclusion goals as well. In the Contract Compliance Division, we are responsible for monitoring the contracts to ensure that these companies are doing what they've committed to do, but it's partners like Hire Minnesota who are actually working with those companies to help them achieve their workforce goals. So we want to continue our collaboration with them. We're going to be, we've invited them to attend our staff meetings and talk with staff about the work that they're doing. They actually have a new tool that they're going to introduce to us in the next coming weeks. So we're really pleased with our partnerships in the community, with organizations, especially like HIRE, who are working with contractors to help them meet their goals.
Well, Mr. Chair, if I can move the staff direction, or I could do it a little bit later.
Sure. Councilmember Gordon, if you can hold off for
Sure.
comments, and then I will come back to you.
All right.
Okay. Councilmember Palmisano?
Mr. Chair, Ms. Francois, just a technical question about the slide that you have up. If somebody is a female minority, if they fit into two categories, where are you placing them in this? Where are you placing them?
We're definitely not double counting them. So how we would count at them as minority.
Okay. Thank you.
All right. Well, Councilmember Gordon, I'm going to make some comments and then I will come back to you. Ms. Francois, when I look at this, without having information from past years, this is fairly new in terms of the reporting. I see all this stuff as aspirational, as you say. Those are the nice words, but for the most part, we're not meeting our goals. And my question to you is, what is our hammer in terms of, getting companies to get to their goals, to get to their commitments? Because certainly, we have this filtering tool where people come to us and say, I'm going to commit to doing this, meeting these goals, and then when they don't do it, we just kind of let it go, and the next time around, it just seems to happen again. And is there a hammer? Is there a way to tell people clearly that that's not how we do business here, and that we need them to meet their goals?
Mr. Chair, yes, there are. And one of the things that we've done this year, first of all, let me say that we cannot require by law that people hire minority or women-owned businesses. We cannot require that they hire minorities or females to work on their projects. We can, however, require that they make a good faith effort for business and workforce inclusion for minorities and women, and for minorities and females. And so we have been working very, very hard, and we've developed a new process for our good faith efforts. We've developed a good faith efforts panel that meets to review good faith efforts. If a bidder is bidding on work here in the city and they don't meet the goals, that triggers a good faith effort review. And our staff actually conducts an investigation and a review, gathering data and information from the companies. We as a panel then sit and determine whether or not those companies made a good faith effort. And I think that is going to help us as we move forward in letting companies know that if you want to do business with the city of Minneapolis, this is what you're going to have to do. So what we've also done in our new process is we have developed a checklist. So if someone's not making a good faith effort, they have to try really hard not to make that effort. And we're very confident that by them making good faith efforts to include minority and women-owned businesses and workforce inclusion, that we'll be able to meet those goals. We also have in place our ordinance that says that if you're not meeting the goals, that there are definitely some repercussions that the city can take against you. And one of them definitely is that we won't do business with those companies again. We also have a new law that was enacted and began on January 1st called the Responsible Contractor Law. And if companies are consistently not meeting their goals, if companies are consistently behaving poorly on sites with regard to minority and women-owned businesses and workforce, then they would not be able to do business with the city or other agencies for a period of time designated for those particular companies. So we are very serious, and I've had to, in the past year, talk to several contractors and deny their good faith efforts and tell them that if you want to do business with the city of Minneapolis, we've got a mayor and a city council who are strongly in favor of workforce and business inclusion, and that we are going to hold them accountable to making those good faith efforts and to achieving the goals that they've committed to.
So, Ms. Francois, I mean, when you talk about that, I mean, a good faith effort is different from requiring companies to hire minorities or women. And so, I mean, you know, when we talk about good faith efforts, I mean, let me ask it this way. So, you know, a goal for minority hiring is 32%. You know, if a company says, you know, I want to make a good faith effort to hit 32%, and then at the end of a project, they're at 15%. And, you know, I mean, conceivably we can say, okay, you know what, they tried. You know, can you do it the next time around? The next time around, you know, I mean, instead of 15%, they hit 16%. I mean, is that good faith?
Well, the good faith effort has to be made in advance, and we do require them to let us know how they're going to go about achieving the goals. They don't necessarily commit to 32 and 6 all the time, but we do hold them accountable to what they have committed to. And if they don't, there are definitely repercussions. We have worked in the past where a company did not meet their goals, and there were liquidated damages that were assessed that the company had to pay. We definitely are very serious about ensuring that companies are meeting the goals that they're committing to. And, you know, the next year, if they increase from 15 to 16%, we're going to sit down with them and we're going to talk with them about what they did on the last contract, what they plan on doing differently on contracts going forward. So the thing is, we don't want to not work with a company. We want to work with them so that they are achieving the goals, so that they're making a good faith effort to achieve the goals. We can't achieve minority and women-owned business inclusion and workforce inclusion without collaboration and partnership with all of our partners, including contractors, including developers. So we're trying to help them to achieve those goals and to make a good faith effort. We provide them with a lot of assistance in doing that. So we're definitely committed to it. And companies know that the city of Minneapolis is serious about workforce and business inclusion goals. And if they're not meeting them, then there's a possibility that they will not be able to do work with the city of Minneapolis.
So let me ask you a hypothetical question. You know, we have a developer or a contractor that's worked with the city of Minneapolis, you know, on 10 contracts. On every single one of them, they're improving, but they're not ever going to hit the goals that we set. I mean, what happens there?
Well, as I said, Mr. Chair, it's not that if they're not making the goals, we're going to work with them. We're going to sit down and bring them into the office, have a conversation, talk with them about what they've done on past contracts to achieve the goals. If they're consistently not meeting the goals that they have committed to, and remember that they commit in advance of a contract to certain goals that may not necessarily be 32 and 6, but if they are consistently not meeting the goals that they have committed to, there are repercussions, especially with this new responsible contractor law that says that, you know, we will review their progress over the past 3 years. We do need 3 years under our belt to review. And if we see that they have consistently not met the goals and that they have consistently not made good faith efforts to meet the goals, then we'll be able to tell them that they won't be able to do work with the city of Minneapolis.
Right. But Ms. Francois, when I'm looking at this, I mean, I'm looking at most of these contractors and developers not meeting the goals ever. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're looking at these numbers and they're not meeting the goals. You know, some of them are, you know, maybe for women, you know, maybe for minority-owned businesses, but for the most part, I mean, a lot of folks are failing. And at some point, we have to just say, these are our goals, and if you're not going to hit it, we're going to do business with somebody who can hit it. And that's the part that, I mean, I understand, the Commissioner of Human Rights is talking about, a timeline, but I mean, at some point, I think as a city of Minneapolis, I mean, we hold ourselves to a higher standard, or at least we try. And, if we're seeing that failure upon failure upon failure is happening, I mean, we got to do something different.
Mr. Chair, I agree wholeheartedly. One of the things that we have to consider as well is how many are out in the workforce, how many minority and women-owned businesses are out there who can actually do the work that we need them to do. That's why we have our BTAP program, our Business Technical Assistance Program, to help businesses to get certified with the MNUCP, or the Minnesota Unified Certification Program. We have our Minneapolis Employment and Training Program, working with community partners to train and make sure that there are enough females and minorities in the workforce to do the kind of work that we have. A lot of construction projects going on right now in the city, and we're going to see these big cranes in our skyline for many years to come. We have to make sure that we are training people and that we are encouraging minority and women-owned businesses to get certified in the scopes of work that we need them to do on these projects. So it's not, we can't do this in isolation. We have partners that we need to be working with, folks like HIRE, folks like the other BTAP providers, META, and others who are providing assistance to minority and women-owned businesses, because our numbers are only as good as the number of people and businesses out there to do the kind of work that we need to get done. So we can only require that businesses make a good faith effort. We will work with them very closely. We will send them to get assistance with our BTAP program. We'll be talking with, assistance provided by HIRE Minnesota. So we are working with them, and 32 was aggressive. We really needed that to happen. But are we going to be able to achieve 32 with all of the work that we have going on around the region right now? There are some projects who are doing very well, but one of the things that I wanted to point out too, and is the tool that I mentioned earlier that HIRE has. It's a projection tool. So we'll be able to look at different projects and determine at different phases of those projects how many minorities and women are going to be working at any one particular time. There may be some times where there are not going to be enough people out there to participate on these projects, but we're trying to do the best we can to collaborate with all of our stakeholders to ensure that we're getting closer to the goal.
Well, Ms. Francois, I mean, for me, I look at this and I just think whatever our aspirational goals are, they have to be realistic. So, if we're not going to meet those goals, let's make it realistic, because, at this point, like when I look at these reports, I just see a bunch of businesses that are not meeting our goals. They're failing. And, we have to do something different to get them to meet the goals or to lower the goals so that they can meet them. But, at this point, I just see failure, and I think we need to do better than this. Councilmember Gordon.
Thank you very much. Well, I don't want to lower the goals, but I think that I do want to see us do better and find ways to do better. I know that there have been times in the past where we have suspended a business and said, you're not going to be qualified to contract with us for 6 months or something, and I think that really gets their attention. So I think we do have to continue bringing resources and assets and trying to help people along, but I agree, I think we also have to sometimes say there are consequences. So it might be interesting in these reports if we actually found out how many companies might have got a warning letter, how many of them have, what is the process for letting them know you're in trouble, you need to do something better, and then how many of them have had some consequences if it's some kind of a fine or if it's some kind of a suspension. That would at least help us see and actually help others see is, oh, Minneapolis does mean business. I mean, to me, this is a really serious part of our work. We know that we have the biggest racial employment gap in the country, and this is one of the few levers that we can actually move up and down on a little bit and try for. I'm actually hopeful that we can get to some of those aggressive goals. They're not just aspirational. Maybe they're a little bit long-term, but we already see some people right there, 28%. I mean, I think that was downtown East maybe, just knocking on the door, to 32. So I think that's fantastic. And that's part of the reason why I wanted to put forward, why I'm putting forward the staff direction to say, let's study best practices more so we know how these people are being successful and we can do that. And then we hear about some projects that aren't city projects that might be enormously successful. So what are our regional partners doing to help monitor those projects too? I did have one little side question though before the staff direction, because I noticed in the beginning of the report, we're talking about our goods and commodities supplies and also our professional technical services contracts, but really the bulk of the report is our construction and development contracts. So are we monitoring those and tracking those, and will we get some data and information about how well we're doing with those other contracts that the city's involved in too?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, yes, we are tracking that information. However, the tracking for commodities and supplies and professional and technical services is not yet a year old, so we don't have data on it. But we have recently started setting goals on commodities and supplies and professional and technical services, so we will be able to report on that information.
Well, I'll be looking forward to that, and that's great. And Mr. Chair, if I can move my staff direction,
please,
that would help us.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, if I could just leap in just for a quick minute. Velma Corbel again, Civil Rights Director. We are fixated on the 32%, and I wanted to make a comment about the 32%. Ms. Francois did talk about how aggressive a goal the State Human Rights Commissioner set in 2012, and she's correct on that. And achieving a 32% goal is a factor of the capacity of people in the workforce. To achieve 32% on a particular project or on a contract requires the planets to align and a lot of things to be in place to be able to do that. And Ms. Francois just brushed against talking about the scope of work in a project. And on those larger projects where you see contractors achieving a 32% minority goal, it's a very broad scope of work. There are so many opportunities to get different kinds of workers on the project, whether they are laborers or skilled trades. There's just a lot of opportunity to do that. There are rare instances in the city where we have a project that's that large, a dollar amount, and that complex a set of scope of work, where we have an opportunity to even get close to 32%. The city's contracts are not that expansive. So the types of workers that are required to do the work on the contract are different than you would see on the Viking Stadium, for example, or the Twin Stadium, for example. But it is a factor of the capacity of people in the workforce to meet that goal. And if you only have a certain percentage of minority electricians in the Twin Cities, there are only going to be so much of a percentage working on a particular contract at a time. And right now, if you just looked at electricians, they are spread so thin because there's so much work going on in the Twin Cities. Luckily, we are getting minority electricians and minority fitters, minority millwright workers working on city contracts, but we need to build the capacity in the workforce. So to me, this sounds like an ideal time to put out a call from the Minneapolis City Council to the pre-apprenticeship training programs, to the unions to help build that capacity in the workforce, because that's why we're not meeting the 32% goal, is because we need to develop that capacity in the workforce. And the city of Minneapolis can't do it on its own. So that I would like to say. The other thing that we touched on was why some of these larger contracts seem to do a much better job of meeting the 32% goal. By the way, you did the 6% goal for females. We're actually exceeding that. So I just want to put that back on the record, that the city of Minneapolis is doing an excellent job on employing women in its construction workforce. But with regard to these larger contracts, what you have when you have a Ryan Construction or when you have a Morton Construction, it's not just the municipality that's forcing contractors to meet goals on these projects. You have companies that have a culture of meeting workforce goals on their projects. So Mortensen Construction tells their contractors, these are the goals you will meet, because we as a contractor, we are assuming 32 and 6. We expect all of our subs to meet 32 and 6. They can say, this is not a good faith effort opportunity. This is a requirement if you're going to be one of our subs. So they can say that. But the city as a government entity can't say to a contractor, you will make the goal or else, because legally we can't say that. So the good faith efforts is the tool that we have right now. So there are lots of opportunities out there to get close to 32 and 6. So I am requesting that the city council go on the record today saying to the pre-apprenticeship training programs and the apprenticeship training programs and the unions that you have to help us build the capacity in the workforce if we are going to achieve 32% minority workforce.
Councilmember Gordon, if I may, I think these words about us being fixated on these goals make no sense to me, because, all I hear are excuses for how we're not hitting those goals. And, on the one hand, we talk about having these goals, and on the other hand, we're not meeting these goals, and we're saying we can't compel contractors to hire minorities and women. And then we also say, well, you know what, to the extent in which, people aren't meeting these goals, there are all these reasons why we're not meeting these goals. And, either we say these goals are good and we're going to meet these goals and we're going to do everything we can to get contractors to meet these goals, or we just say, you know what, let's lower the goals. But go ahead, please, with your staff direction.
Okay. Well, we could debate the goals later if you want, but, and I don't know if the council president wants to comment before the staff direction or not. I just want to comment that at least on some of that I acknowledge it's a longer and it's a bigger job, and it's beyond just the contract compliance division to actually develop the pipeline and to provide the jobs and to do all these other things. And I think the city is on record saying we need to work with our educational institutions, we need to work down to the high school level, our apprenticeship programs, with the unions and everybody to help us be part of solving this solution. The city's joined the regional Everybody In initiative to try to do that and get all the partners aligned. We have been working with institutions, MCTC, Summit Academy, others, looking at that. And you're absolutely right. We need to be looking at the pipeline, what jobs are going to be needed, and we also have to be making sure people feel like they want those kind of jobs and they want that kind of work, and so they'll get the training needed to do that. So this all fits within a much bigger picture. My staff direction was just to direct staff to research and identify the best practices and processes used on projects in Minneapolis and the region that have been most successful in meeting workforce and business inclusion goals. And it should include processes used by successful contractors as well as those used by other regional agencies that provide enforcement oversight for business and workforce inclusion programs in Minnesota, and further that staff's directed to report back on or before July 29, 2015 with recommendations regarding improved use of best practices in Minneapolis. And I think this will, that's the staff direction.
Okay. Do you want to speak on it?
I probably already have kind of spoke to it enough, but I think that's going to help us so that we have a set of best practices, then we can hold out to other people who aren't performing well or who want to perform better and look at it. And if one of the best practices is that the general contractor adopts these goals and requires them of the subcontractors, which we heard about just recently, that would be a great best practice, and say, oh, that's how they're successful, and to do that. But whatever they are, I think it's important we talk about it, we raise those up, and we look at those and do those. I think we'll find that'll help us get closer to reaching our goals, however aspirational and far-reaching they may appear at times.
Council members, anyone with anything to add? President Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and Councilmember Gordon, I love this motion. I think, one of the things that we do, and Councilmember Yang actually is, correct in this. We have a really high goal, we don't meet it, and then we beat ourselves up for it. But there are people that do it. So what are they doing right? And Director Corbel, I appreciate your, look at, and I think Councilmember Gordon's motion gets to that. Who's doing things the right way that produce people into that pipeline? Is it is it Summit that we've partnered with? Is it the unions? Is it small businesses that get us in that right direction? And I think your motion, will get us information that will let us then work with people who are having more challenges. And, Director Corbel, I understand on these big projects, you've got people who have been doing this for 50 years, whatever, and they have opportunities. They're known. People can come to them, know they're going to get employed for a long time. If they're a good worker, they got a chance of getting onto something else, another construction project. So they're more attractive, perhaps, to that person that's just getting out of apprentice school than maybe a new contractor. So there's benefits in having that long history. But I do think we can learn from the people that are successful in this and offer help and technical assistance or whatever. And also, I think some evaluation of some of the things that we do. You know, I have some people tell me that Summit Academy is the greatest thing on earth. And then I've got other people telling me it's not. You know, I'd like to know sometimes what the real story is, and maybe it's in between. Maybe it works for some people, doesn't work for other people. But anyway, I just think information about people that are doing it right is always a good thing to look at and offer, learn lessons from it. So I think this is a great staff direction.
Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of this staff direction, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the staff direction carries.
I would also move to receive and file the report.
Any discussion on that? Okay, all those in favor, please say aye. 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 Any opposed? The motion carries. Thank you. All right, we will move on to item number 4, which is receiving and filing the 2014 Office of Police Conduct Review year-end report. And the two speakers today are Mr. Michael Brown and Commander Chris Granger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As you stated, my name is Michael Brown. I'm the Director of the Office of Police Conduct Review. I'm one of the joint supervisors of the office, along with Commander Chris Granger from the Internal Affairs Unit from the Minneapolis Police Department. I just want to note a couple other folks who are in the room here today with us. We have the Chair of the Police Conduct Oversight Commission, Andrea Brown, who's to my left, and also behind me to my right is Mr. Don Belfield, who is the former chair of the Civilian Police Review Authority, but a current review panelist for the Office of Police Conduct Review Police Oversight Panel. So I want to talk a little bit about how we're going to look at this data. For those who were here back when we presented on the first year report, we were looking at data just looking backwards 1 year because that was the data that we had. And I thank the council for the indulgence in being able to move to a calendar year to be able to report the information out. That's going to give us an opportunity to do some comparative data. I like to look at our data from a comparative standpoint so we can kind of see where we're going with the data and to take a look at what some of the changes are. So this data that we're going to look at today is going to be, in some respects, exact same information that's in the reports that were submitted, but also it's going to be some comparative data for 2013 and 2014. So with that, I think what we'll do is we'll just jump right into the first slide and we'll take a look at our complaints filed and complaints resolved. And what I think really stands out in this particular, well, let me start by saying that the complaints filed, this is all the matters that are coming into the office. So really what we're looking at are signed complaints. This is going to include everything, whether the complaint doesn't have jurisdiction or if the complaint doesn't have any merit or if the complaint doesn't state sufficient facts for us to take any additional action on it. This is just the world of complaints that we receive and that come through our office. One of the things that you see is that it's a steady caseload over the last couple of years. There hasn't been any decrease since we've changed over to the Office of Police Conduct Review. One of the things that I do want to point out is that over the time, one of the things that we've noticed is with this higher volume of cases that we've needed to switch around some of the responsibilities. Originally, a lot of the initial intake work was being conducted by our legal analyst, and as the commission started to do more of its work, we needed to move some of those responsibilities away from the legal analyst to free that position up and to consolidate the work in one individual. So that right now is the intake investigator position, and I think we're at the point now, and this is particularly for some comments from a number of years ago that we talked about. Councilmember Gorner will remember that we said that we would come back and start talking about the things that we need. One of the things that I think that we're seeing now that we're in a position to ask for is we're going to be looking for a position probably for the 2016 budget for the intake investigator position specifically, because this is something that's really critical. All these cases are flowing through this particular position, and it's also fielding and preparing all those cases that are coming through, whether they've been dropped off at Internal Affairs or they've been dropped off in our office. It's the work that the joint supervisors need in order to make a decision. So one of the things that we are seeing then is that overall we're having steady caseload, and that steady caseload is really kind of the macro picture of what we're looking at. Why don't we move to the next slide? And in the next slide, what you're going to see are the allegations. Now, I want to point out that to begin with, there are 9 categories. These are the categories that are outlined by the ordinance. This is really sort of a snapshot of where these cases are falling. You'll see that there's a general category of violation of policy and procedure manual. Those are cases that are the more specific. So of course, all of the cases that you see on the list here also have policy and procedure references, but for purposes of reporting and for purposes of showing where those cases land, what we do is we break those out, and the ones that are a little bit more specific fall under the specific policy and procedure category. So particularly, what I want to point out is the ways in which the cases are starting to fall into groups. That was probably the thing that is most helpful and noticeable for us as far as being able to make some decisions about cases. Specifically, what you see is that there are essentially 3 tiers of cases. The ones that are accumulating the most amount of consistency would be the inappropriate language, attitude, conduct, and then the violations of the policy and procedure manual. That's kind of the first tier of groups of cases. The second tier is excessive force, the harassment, and then the failure to provide adequate and timely police protection. And then the third tier is discrimination, theft, and then the criminal misconduct cases. One other thing that I want to note specifically about the violations of the policy and procedure manual, those are all ranges. So the lowest range would be an A, the highest range would be the D. Those capture all of those. And then by way of just some examples, we also have listed out just a few of the common ones that we'll see that would fall into that category. And again, that's to Councilmember Gordon, that was a comment that you were wondering about the last time that we had a report, which was, well, what are the sorts of things that fall under those categories? So we just wanted to share with you a few of the things that we see that come up relatively regularly. So the third slide is a specific look at the joint supervisor case resolution. So once a case comes from the intake investigator for preparation and all of the background information that's gathered, it's then presented to the joint supervisor. So again, that's myself and Commander Granger to take a look at, to review, to assess, and then make a decision. And as you can see, in comparison to the 2013 and the 2014 numbers, now specifically looking at the ratios, not the specific numbers, but the ratios, you're going to see that there are some consistencies there. There's some consistencies in the decision making. For 2014, you see a little fewer cases going to coaching, few more cases going to investigation. Other than that, what you're seeing is some consistency. The other thing that I also would note is that during this time period, we did have a transition in the command staff in internal affairs. So I think that this is also, it bodes really well for our process, which is that it can endure a transition. And that was one of the things that we were really looking to see be put in place. Now, I'd like to spend a little bit of time talking about the coaching timelines. Back in 2013, at the end of the year, so this is the fourth quarter look. For those who attend the commission meetings, they're familiar with the way that we present this information, which is we like to look at the previous quarter and then the current quarter, and we kind of go back and forth through each one of the quarterly presentations. Here, what we're going to do is we're just going to take a look at the snapshot from the fourth quarter 2013. So this would be December 31st, 2013. And then we're going to take a look at that same slide back in 2014 in December. So here's a couple of things that I think is specifically identifiable, at least from this chart and the next. Here what we saw at the time period was the 5th precinct was the precinct that was operating within the cases that are out and cases that are returned, the specific performance timeline. This was an issue that was identified. It was brought to the attention of the command staff, specifically the police chief. And I think this is where we're going to see probably the most dramatic change in some of the numbers, and also I think as a result of that, some of the more dramatic changes in culture in the police department around the coaching. So if you take a look at 2014 or 2013 and look at 2014, we see a stark difference. One of the things that we see specifically now is that you have the 2nd precinct, the 3rd precinct, the 5th precinct, all operating within the performance standards. Now, a little comment about the 4th precinct. Technically speaking, they're a day over, so we didn't want to specifically call them operating within the performance standards. I think practically speaking, they are. And also, you have only 2 outliers. That's your special assignments, which is the others, and then the 1st precinct. Noting, of course, the significant improvement and the turnaround times that we're seeing from the 1st precinct. 2 things that I'd point out about that. Recalling again that both 1st precinct and 4th precinct had leadership transitions. It should be noted that even during those leadership transitions, we saw the decrease in the time resolutions. So I think that there's a success factor that is there. This particular slide now is looking a little bit closer at what some of the outcomes are of those coaching documents. I think what we see, first of all, is that overall, there is a little difficulty in comparing the 2013 and 2014 numbers. I'll just say that as a caveat. Here's the reason why. It's the reason that I mentioned earlier, which is that you had a number of cases that were outstanding. So when those come in, they're coming in at various times. So they're not going to be a one-to-one match. But this is a pretty good representation of it. And so what we have is indicators that the coaching is happening. We see that there are improvements in the coaching documentation. We know that the coaches are getting experience because there are more coachings that are happening. We know that based on the coaching documents returning to us, that there are more coaching opportunities that are coming about. So overall, what we do see is we see that there's an increase in the coaches feeling comfortable in finding violations of the policy procedure manual. And also what we're seeing is that there is more coaching happening overall. So this is roughly representing about 41% of those cases that are sent to coaching are resulting in coaching action, which is a significant improvement from our previous methodologies. And also we're seeing roughly about 13% of the cases that are sent to coaching that are resulting in a policy violation. So this is going to be the last chart in the pipeline. We have a few other charts just to show you some of the other work that's happening, but this is the last chart in the pipeline of the process. And of course, this is the chief's action. I will note that this is action that's just tracking what the chief's office is doing. It's not specifically what the Office of Police Conduct Review is doing, but we wanted to show what some of those outcomes were. What we see overall is that there's been clearly an increase in chief action. I think part of that is that what we're doing is getting more of the cases through the system. All of the cases that have gone through the review panels have been unanimous decisions. The cases are strong. The review panels are making very clear decisions about what are the reasons why they're finding merit. And of course, you have the chief taking action on all of the merit cases that we've moved forward that are at the B level or above. Overall, in 2014, there was one time where there was a case that went from the review panel with a merit designation to the chief's office that did not receive action on it. That was an A-level matter, and that was only one time in the calendar year of 2014. So for a quick summary, here is what we see happening. We, again, the emphasis on that intake investigator, that critical function that we're seeing, we're using more and more, and to be on the lookout for a request for an FTE for that particular position. It's very critical for us to be able to make decisions of the cases, and also that position is really turning over those cases in a matter of days. When you have a high case load, as you can see, a high case inventory, it's really critical to get that material gathered and get those cases resolved. And that's in comparison to the previous way we were doing it, where it took months for us to be able to get through some of those intakes. Of course, the summer months we're seeing is the height. I think this year we had the most number of cases filed over the summer period. That continues to be a pattern that we're seeing, and we would expect that in the future, most likely we're going to see more cases coming through our system during the summer periods. We're seeing more use of the coaching, and we're seeing that the coaching documents are becoming more robust, and there's more information that's being gathered. We're also starting to see more policy violations being designated by the coaches. We've got all the precincts functioning within the performance standards for coaching, all except one, and the first precinct's very close to being there. The fourth precinct's off by 1 day, and I think that's a technical designation. I do think that that's a precinct that's also functioning within our expectations. And of course, we still continue to have unanimous decisions from the review panel. And the chief has taken action on all the cases, specifically all the cases that are B levels and above, have received some sort of action from the chief's office. So there's one other slide that I wanted to talk about specifically. I don't have a whole lot of things that I wanted to say about it, other than the fact that I wanted to show some of the activities of the commission. The commission has really been working hard to address a number of issues. And as you can see from this particular chart, the first 33 are the number of cases that they've reviewed as an audit. The 110 are the number of synopses that they've reviewed. So they get the synopses, they get 10 synopses every month, and they pick 3 of those cases off of the synopses for summary purposes, and then to be able to review. So that first 33 number are the number of cases that they've actually reviewed in summary format. The 110 are the synopses that they've reviewed. In the past year, they had 33 meetings. They have undertaken 4 research and studies. They've conducted 5 outreach events, and they've received 13 presentations during their meetings. And so one other note about their presentations. One of the things that we're seeing is that it's really turned into a fantastic communication tool between the civilian oversight mechanism and the police department. The police department has really come forward and offered a number of these presentations to provide more information about some of the things that they're doing. Most recently, we had some conversations around the work of the OGP and the committee structure, and it's really just been a very useful tool for helping to create some more of the transparency in the system. So that's really been fantastic, and they've been really busy, and I really am thankful for Chair Brown for her work on that. I also wanted to mention that the Police Conduct Oversight Commission also issued a report of their activities. So if you want to know some more detail about that, I do have some copies with me, but this is also online on their website that really details more specifically some of the actions that they've taken in the past year.
Right, Council President Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Mr. Brown, go back to your, if you wouldn't mind, to your chief's slide and explain to me how someone gets to be coached by the chief rather than at the precinct level.
Absolutely.
And then and then I guess I would ask, because isn't there some kind of a first time you get coached, second time something else happens. So what's the difference between someone who's coached at the precinct level and the chief's level, and what happens to the next incident then?
Mr. Chair and Council President Johnson, you've got 2 specific questions there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take one of those questions, and then I'm going to ask the Internal Affairs Commander, Commander Granger, to come forward and talk to you specifically about the progressive discipline, where the A levels and the B levels and C levels and how those interact with each other. That's more in his wheelhouse specifically. But as far as these designations, what happens is that All of these cases have received an investigation that go to the chief. They've all received investigation. So that's the big distinction between a case that gets resolved through the joint supervisor designation chart that I showed earlier that had the 4 different parts. So that's the office using their authority under the ordinance to make decisions for the cases. All of those cases that are designated as investigations will get assigned to an investigator, whether it's a civilian or a sworn. It'll have either one of 2 designations. It will either be a preliminary investigation or it'll be an administrative investigation. All administrative investigations go in front of the review panel. All review panel decisions go to the chief. So these are all of the review panel decisions that have merit that went to the chief and what the chief did with those. And of course, the chief has the array of options there. You see written reprimand, suspensions, but training and coaching are also options. And so if the chief's office were to make a decision about the officer needing more training in a particular situation, they would absolutely be within their authority to do so. So as far as the progressive discipline, I'm going to have Commander Granger speak to that.
Commander Chris Granger, Minneapolis Internal Affairs. Mr. Chairman, Council President Johnson. To answer your question about the coaching that would come as a result of a determination from the chief's office, we have our violation levels, our category levels, which is A through D. Once a case has gone to the investigation process and the chief makes a final determination on that case, if that case is sustained at an A level, then coaching would occur at the precinct. The case would be returned to them. They would conduct the coaching that was directed by the chief's office and then complete a memo and forward that memo back, which would be added to the case file.
Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a question for you, Commander Granger.
Okay.
But it is about something Mr. Brown said, and I think it's a couple slides forward. But I don't understand something that you mentioned, which is what do policy violations based on coaching documents mean? Does that, it's a bullet point, it's something that you referenced, and I don't understand. Does that mean that out of coaching sometimes a policy violation is identified?
Yes, ma'am.
And how does that work just, experientially with a coach and an officer? I don't get it.
Okay. Well, essentially, when there is a coaching investigation that's conducted at the precinct, the supervisor would be assigned by the precinct commander to conduct the investigation. And at its conclusion, the supervisor would determine, which would also be approved by the commander later, whether or not there was a policy violation. That's the first question. The second question is whether there's a coaching conversation that can occur to improve performance for the future. So if those things take place, then what we would expect is the precinct or command would go ahead and document that conversation and return that information on the document.
Okay, so when a policy violation comes out of coaching or something like that, I mean, that is something that happened in the past. It's not about that ongoing coaching or kind of mentoring exercise to help someone do their job better. It's something that happened, and we're going to acknowledge that and move on with this coaching as a remedy for it.
It's sort of a twofold response. Essentially, if there's a policy violation, that's a documentation that a policy violation occurred. And as far as our discipline matrix system works, if you receive a category A level violation, if you receive 2 of the same kind of violation in a year, that case is enhanceable to a B through a D level, or usually a B level. Or if you receive three category A violations, any 3 A violations in a year, then that case is also enhanceable too. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that helps. Thank you.
Councilmember Gordon.
Well, thank you very much. And I just had a couple of general comments and then maybe a question that you can sit down or stay up there if you want. I'm not sure. But I did want to say I appreciate some of the additional information that was provided in the report. I think it was useful. There was some demographics in there too about the people who file complaints and some more specifics. So I really appreciated that. I also wanted to highlight the work of the Oversight Commission. They've done work that's been valuable to me because I've been able to go online and access some of the reports that they got from the police department. I know that, for example, I learned a whole lot more about Terry stops than I ever learned before by seeing what the department had presented to the commission. That was very useful. I also noticed in the report there are a couple of links to some draft reports. A draft report on coaching was one of them that I was looking at, and so it'll be interesting to see what comes out of that. I think that the whole coaching thing is still a little bit unclear about how well that's going to work. There's still some concerns that, oh, they're just sending it to coaching. That just means the supervisor is going to say, be nicer next time, and it's not going to amount to anything. And that, I guess, leads me to my question, because I know that coaching also got called out in the, I'm going to call it the DOJ report. I know they wanted to make it really clear that it was their Office of Diagnostic something or other, but the DOJ report kind of highlighted coaching. It also highlighted maybe a little bit the potential of reforming the whole system or the process. So maybe you could just highlight where we are in the process of working on that recommendation from the Department of Justice's evaluation in terms of coaching and other recommendations that might come forward. I'm hoping the Commission's looking at those too with you.
And Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, if you don't mind, I would like to first address Councilmember Palisano's comment, just to clarify one point, which is for the coaching, all of those cases are complaint-driven. So the reason why those cases are being referred to coaching is because there has been a specific incident in the past that has happened. That's what you're seeing on that chart that's before you right now. Every one of those is attached to a complaint. Councilmember Gordon, to your point, I think the way that, from our perspective that we're looking at that, when OJP came in to take a look at our process, we were only about 15 months into really setting up the Office of Police Conduct Review, the commission, the review panels, and we were trying to figure out what would be the best way for that, for those three entities to function and operate with each other. So one of the things that's really interesting is that a lot of the things that we had an opportunity to discuss with OJP were things that we were thinking about doing. The feedback that we're getting specifically about coaching from OJP is that it's a good tool to use. And that's quite a validation for a changed process, particularly for a civilian oversight process, because what that does is it allows us to really serve in that function of oversight and tracking and taking a look at more of the technical pieces of it, and then letting the supervisors function as supervisors, and they have that conversation with the officers. So that's a really key piece of it. So I don't see anything in the OJP report that specifically talks about changing that process any. I think what we want to do is improve and strengthen, and those are all things that are being handled by one of the subdivision groups of that the police department has put together, a work group to work through that. The police department also put together a work group to work through some of the comments that they made about the oversight and the police conduct review process. So a lot of that's going to go through that operation to take a look at it. There's some things that we specifically by ordinance as joint supervisors have authority to make decisions on. I think they're really the piece that I think is going to be helpful is to start having some of the conversations as to what will be the things that we could do to strengthen the process that we have based off of the statistics that we're looking at right now, based off of the feedback that we've had. We feel like we're going in a good direction for being able to have a good oversight, a good, strong oversight process that has buy-in on both ends of the spectrum.
So one of the questions I have about the coaching has to do with follow-through with maybe the complainant or that, because I do think it will help if I'm assuming that coaching is going on all the time, and I hope that it is, and sometimes I actually will get a complaint I'll field about some officer. I'll tell the precinct commander, and I'm assuming they'll have a conversation about it, and there'll be coaching involved. But this is a little bit different because it's entered a formal process, and it's been referred back for coaching. So if there are some protocols that need to be developed about what does that actually mean, here's what we expect the coach to gather so they understand the situation before they have the conversation. That would be important too. I think there might be some precinct inspectors that would actually call the complainant and say, well, what actually happened, so they can figure out what's going on, others who might not. So that would be something to think about, and I think that is a direction that you've been moving in. And also looking at the review of the draft report of the commission, I think they're thinking about, well, what would constitute a good coaching as opposed to a not so good coaching, and let's just help people and be better coaches or whatever. But the issue I'm also curious about is does the complainant ever understand or get feedback about the disposition of the coaching that has occurred? Because I'm not quite sure how that works according to our information. I mean, is the case closed out and does coaching occur and does that information get shared back, or does that just disappear into this hole of privacy because it's not actually discipline?
And Mr. Chair, Councilmember Gordon, these are excellent questions that you're asking. These are all parts that we've been working through the last couple of years to try to put into place. I think now that we've gotten this feedback from OJP, it's going to be really helpful for us to be able to put some of the final touches on it. I just want to note that, particularly for an organization that's younger than 5 years, it wouldn't be uncommon for us to continually be working on trying to put these pieces into place. So I think it was well timed to be able to have this information so that we could really point to specific things that we wanted to do, and documentation of our processes was definitely one of them. We've got a police process manual that is from the Internal Affairs Unit that describes all the steps that one would take for going through the coaching process. We are in the process of developing our own process manual to be able to have specifics that would address all of those issues. So it was quite timely to be able to get that information from OJP that was saying, hey, you should document these steps and you should clarify certain procedures, and it coincided with the action that we were already taking as joint supervisors to be able to do that. One other thing that I did want to point out was that those reports that you're talking about are fantastic reports that are coming out of the PCOC. Those reports are written by our legal analyst, Ryan Patrick, who is here with us today, and it's stellar work. And the reason why he's been able to do that work is that we've been able to peel away that intake investigator work, so that it just kind of shows, in order to get the quality reports like that, it does take some focused, dedicated time, and that's the reason why in this coming cycle we're going to be asking for an FTE for the intake investigator, so that we can be able to continue to provide that level of service.
So what about the information of the complaints when coaching is the consequence? Does the complainant get to hear about that?
So particularly with the feedback from the coaching sessions, that's all coming, all that contact is coming from the precincts. So that information is being documented on the coaching documents. And one of the things that we notice is that sometimes it's documented really well, sometimes it's not documented as well as we'd like to have it documented. That was part of the catalyst that sparked the coaching study and that research and study that was undertaken by the commission to take a look at it and to see, is there a pattern? Is there something we can do to improve the process? So part of what we wanted to do was first spend 2 years gathering the documentation. We wanted to see what we had first. Now that we've been able to study and take a look at it, the commission will then start working with that coaching committee that was set up with the OJP with the OJP recommendations, and start developing some recommendations on how we can improve the coaching process.
So not necessarily. So if the disposition of the complaint is it's referred to coaching, that means the complainant doesn't necessarily find out about that. Is that what we're saying? Because that doesn't constitute discipline?
To answer your question, the Minnesota Data Practices Act does not allow us to share the details of the coaching investigation because it's not discipline. So we require the precinct supervisors to contact the complainants because we want to make sure that they know that we've received their complaint, we've investigated it, but we can't tell them details about that. But we would encourage anyone who has continued problems in the future to call us back and, make another complaint if that's the case. As far as the coaching investigation goes, we could definitely explain that process to them. If there was questions about that, it generally entails talking to the complainant first off, talking to the witness officers or other witnesses at the scene, gathering evidence, squad video, etc., and then a decision is made at the end of that investigation for the outcome.
Okay. Seems, ideally, I think it would be a complainant could get a call back and say, we heard your case, we looked at it, and we've referred it to coaching to the precinct. But I guess we can't legally maybe do that.
But we do notify them that the complaint was handled. We do that. We require that.
Then that it's over.
Yes.
But
yep.
We don't. Okay. And do we say no discipline? Do we tell them it was no discipline then, if it's referred to coaching, or how do we? maybe you can send me or let me know offline, and we don't have to take a lot of time here. I know I'm dragging the meeting on with my questions here too.
That's okay.
Yeah.
I can answer that.
Okay.
What would be public information in that instance would be status and existence. So we would say that there was a complaint, but the complaint is closed with no discipline. That would be
Okay.
the conversation.
So I'd assume it's a lot less than maybe what we're really trying to do, but that's okay. Okay, thank you.
And if I may, I just want to make a small correction. There were actually two cases, two merit decisions that came back from the chief's office, where the chief's office made a different determination than the merit decision. Not one, but two.
Council members, any other questions? Commander Granger, I have a set of questions kind of related to the same thing, though. So in regards to sworn investigators, how many are there?
7.
Okay, and how many civilian investigators are there?
Currently 3.
3, okay. So, when I'm looking at the charts on page 14, which is OPCR investigator assignments, generally, when I read the charts, requested civilian, requested sworn, usually people request something, they're going to get it. It's pretty close to that. One percentage is almost in the 80s. The other is, about 66% or something like that. With regards to no preference, though, it's split evenly. And that's the part I don't understand is, on the civilian side, there's 3. On the sworn side, there's 7. You would think that, the breakdown would kind of match that sort of 3 and 7. And here it's about 50-50. And so I'm wondering, and I'm asking within the context of footnote 1, which I read pretty quickly, but, budget cycle 2015, there's going to be a request for 2 FTEs for civilians. And, in that situation, we're talking about workloads and those sorts of things, but I would imagine when folks have no preference, we would break it down so that the civilians would, or the civilian investigators would get less of the caseload than the sworn. And I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, whenever myself and Director Brown, whenever we do intake and make those decisions about where a case should be assigned, sometimes those decisions are made based on the type of cases that are already in our caseload. Sometimes those decisions are made on the type of case that it is, where we make a decision about whether it should be investigated by a sworn or not. And sometimes if there's no preference, then it's just a matter of, okay, we'll give this case to this person and give this case to that person.
Right. And Commander Granger, in no way am I insinuating that your sworn investigators are doing less work, but what I'm saying here is that, the spread in terms of, who gets what cases and that sort of thing, it doesn't really make sense within the context of 7 sworn investigators and 3 civilian investigators.
Okay. Well, again, those are individual decisions that are made at the time of intake, and they're again made based on the kind of case, the number of cases in the pipeline. It's a decision that's made at the moment, or in the moment, I should say.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. Any other questions? All right. With no more questions, I'm going to move to receive and file this report. Any discussion on that? All right. Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. And with that, we have no further business before this committee, so we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you.